Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined the Frame of Mind Coaching Podcast. I can't wait to introduce you to my next guest. Her name is Lorrie Gray. She's actually a friend of mine on Instagram, and I've been kind of like hovering around, following her, checking her out, and seeing what she has to say. And I have to say, there aren't that many people who click with me or connect with me from a coaching standpoint, but Lorrie does. So I can't wait for you to talk to her. Lorrie, welcome.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. I agree. I was really excited to meet you and super excited just to talk and get to know you more here.
So you are a coach
Mhm.
and you specialize in working with people who experience chronic pain. Did I get that right?
Pretty much. I mean, in truth, I work with a lot of different people, but I do work with a lot of people who have chronic health issues. People are drawn to me because of that. To have a coach who gets what they're going through is really powerful.
So you at one point had and still do to I think, right? You still have chronic pain
Every day. Yes.
every day. So what kind of pain do you have? And then you'll describe, what that is all about. But what is the pain?
Yeah. So I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So it affects my connective tissue, and that comes in a lot of forms, but for me it really strongly affects my joints. So it means that my if my muscles get fatigued, my joints are going to move too much. So there's a lot of rubbing or some things or things just not being in place, like dislocations, subluxations, slightly, even just being not quite in alignment creates pain. So I deal with that. Actual joint pain from joints not being in alignment
Is it specific
regularly.
joints or is it all the joints?
At this point, it affects all of them to some extent. So it started out just in my pelvis when I was pregnant with my second child. So the weight of kind of having this condition combined with already being a mom and losing some muscle mass, right? Because I'm not exercising, combined with then trying to carry a baby. Um, so it started there, and it was sort of a downhill spiral because then I had to spend like one solid year in bed, like the second half of my pregnancy and another 6 months. And so I lost, like, all of my muscles were atrophied. And then whenever I would try to move, the connective tissue was failing and I didn't have muscle to help. So then everything started dislocating. It started with my spine, which moved enough that it fractured one of my vertebrae, and then ribs and wrists and knees and shoulder blades and my jaw. Like, I think at this point, I think I've dislocated everything on my body at least once. Um, but the ones that I use a lot are more impacted. And it kind of depends on what I'm doing.
So this was so bad that you were actually in a wheelchair for like 5 years.
5 years. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was mostly in a bed. I couldn't even be in a wheelchair full time. But if I was going to sit up or move very far, I had to use a wheelchair. But even then, I was I was in so much pain I could barely use a wheelchair. Like, that was hard on me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and how long ago was this?
So I stopped using my wheelchair in December of 2014. So this got really bad in the fall of '09. So really bad for about 5 years. I honestly should have continued using it for a couple of years after that, but I just, once I got well enough that I didn't have to, I mentally and emotionally was not in a space to continue. So I probably should have for a while, but so that's been now, that's 6 years ago that I've been, or about 5.5 years I've been wheelchair free.
So, I mean, I want to ask about that, but you mentioned that you have two kids.
Yes.
Like you look super young, your skin is perfect. Like, how
Oh
old are
gosh.
you? Like, am I allowed to ask that?
You are allowed to ask. I'm such an open book. I am 36.
Wow. So you
So I
spent like your 20s
yes.
sick.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean,
Okay.
I got married fairly young, which is so funny. I was so independent. I didn't think I would ever get married, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, so I got married at 20, had kids fairly young after thinking I would be like career woman. And then yeah, it was second pregnancy. So my 20s, whenever most people are active, my second daughter, I picked her up for the first time when she was 5.
Wow.
Okay. So I couldn't even parent her. Nope. I was
So,
just
so
in a
you were
bed.
in bed. How did you parent from bed?
Ooh, well, I mean, honestly, I do have a fantastic spouse, right? So he really did most of it. There was a couple years there where I was genuinely non-functional. Like I woke up at like the top of the pain scale, and if I went to the bathroom and came back, I was to the point of not being able to do anything. So there were a number of years there when they were little that I really, if once or twice a week I could be present for a short amount of time. I mean, they would come in, right? They're kids. So my toddler comes in and she shows me the thing, and I try to like smile and be happy. That was about it. When they got older, when she got to kindergarten phase, I was getting a little bit better. And so I homeschooled her from my bed, basically teaching her to read and doing things that I could do laying down. Just spent a lot of time with her. And the youngest
Wow.
we napped together every day. That was my bonding with my youngest, because I needed a nap and she needed a nap. So I would do homeschool with my oldest from bed. I would nap with my youngest. Um, it wasn't much. I'm very grateful to have such a supportive partner who picked up the slack, and even some friends who helped as well, but I couldn't do much.
Tell me about how you exist, how you have a relationship with someone when you're in bed all the time. Like, how does that affect your marriage?
Ooh, we could how long is this podcast supposed to be? We could go a long time on that, my friend. Um, ah, it was it was hard. Like, it was really hard. I don't even know if I have words for that. I don't think I expected that question, but it was, like I said, thankfully, we were both the kind of people that entered into the marriage not really giving ourselves like an out. It was like, nope, we're both in this forever. We're going to make it work no matter what. But a lot of it was learning to accept and love the people that we became through the process. Because when you go through something like that, it changes both people. So I mean, on this end of it, I think we still have a relationship because we chose to love and accept who we became. In the midst of it, it really felt like a lot of just getting by. And like, thankfully, my husband has more grace than any other person I've ever met, and he was very, very patient with me when I had a lot of pain and couldn't function well.
Mhm.
But there were years there whenever we couldn't touch. Like if somebody even sat by me on the bed, that little bit of shifting of pressure spiked my pain so terribly that honestly, there were a lot of years, and obviously with a pelvis that's dislocated, that completely makes bedroom scene not happening. And there was honestly just not a lot of touching. So I think it was that commitment to love each other no matter what that we retained, even though in a day-to-day sense there wasn't a lot that looked like a traditional relationship. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I have more questions, but I'm gonna move forward for now. I think I don't know if you're sitting or standing, but you're
I'm
clearly
standing.
not in a wheelchair.
I'm not.
So how did you move out of that? How did you get from a bed to standing and standing for a long period of time for a podcast?
Right. I the joke is that it was just sheer stubbornness, basically. But so the interesting thing was we were living in Colorado whenever all of this happened. We were volunteering with an international organization doing like humanitarian stuff overseas. So definitely not something that we could continue doing. And when we noticed that, I asked my husband, I'm like, what? Okay. I'm like, I'm going to be stuck in a bed. We are homeschooling our kids. What do you want to do? And he said he wanted to be an actor, that he had apparently always wanted to do that and sort of suppressed it. So with me in a wheelchair and a 4 and a 6-year-old, we moved to LA. Okay.
Okay.
As one does, right? We
What
can
else
judge.
would you do?
What else would you do, right? Makes sense. But honestly, part of it was just I don't want to give myself more credit. I mean, I did the work, but it was kind of a survival thing. We got here, the apartment that we had fell through, things were more expensive than we thought, weren't getting good work, and my husband had to go do like work outside of the home. And it kind of just came down to this. And we were in like a second story apartment with no elevator because, again, our first apartment fell through. We were here like with the moving truck and just had to move in somewhere. And it was just this, I have got to figure out a way to make this work. And so there were a lot of there's a couple things that happened all at once. There was sort of this realization of like, there's got to be something else. Like for 5 years I'd been doing everything that Western medicine told me, and was getting worse. Like I was developing all of these secondary things. It's like suddenly I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and I had adrenal fatigue, and I had thyroid issues, and I was developing autoimmune conditions. And so I'm like, okay, let's try something else. combined with I have to figure out a way to take care of my children by myself. And so it was major diet changes, major changes to all of the lifestyle stuff that I could do. I increased my therapy, physical therapy a lot, and basically committed like once a day, I am going to get myself down these stairs to a chair so that my children can play and we don't go crazy in this like 700 square foot apartment in Glendale, right? And I did that and it was so, so, so hard just to get myself down the stairs. But I just basically kept working at it. And so then I was able to get down the stairs into like the front yard. And then I was able to get down the stairs and I would walk to the sidewalk and then back to my chair. And then I would walk 10 steps down the sidewalk and then back to my chair and then to the first house and to the second house. And 6 months after drastically overhauling my diet, weaning off a lot of my major meds and switching to stuff more natural and just stubbornly pushing my body as much as I could without overdoing it. 6 months later, I made it to the end of the block, basically. And then it's just been, honestly, I'm still like in process, but I feel like every couple months I find a new modality, a new thing that could help. And I layer that in and I add a new supplement and I make a new change and I make a whatever. So a lot of people want to know kind of like what was the secret. I'm like, there wasn't one. Like I have
Is
a
there
thousand.
one, like, was this like a get rid of all alcohol and sugar kind of concept? Like, what was the major
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge part.
dietary change?
Like if there's a healing diet out there, I've been on it, but initially it was just going to a anti-inflammatory diet because the movement in my joints was creating so much, there was so much inflammation. That was a huge part of the pain. And my husband had come across like hey, I heard this person had like a pain issue and they went on this diet and they created this cookbook. Here, do you want to try it out? But yeah, so it was switching to yeah, no sugar, no alcohol, no processed foods, nothing like that. Just really clean stuff. So it was taking out the bad, but then it was also increasing collagen rich foods and stuff that would also support my body. So it was taking out the inflammatory stuff, putting in the healing stuff. And yeah, it was, I mean, it was, the change was significant. Like I said, I mean, I've made so many changes since then that were more mindset and buried emotions and things like that.
I'm
But
getting there. I'm getting
yeah, we're
there.
going to get there. But initially, that I feel like the diet change and getting off the major meds is what actually let me get out of the wheelchair and start making that progress.
So let's jump ahead now.
Mhm.
So mindset changes. So much so that now you're coaching people
Mhm.
on both the physical pain aspect and the mindset stuff. So
Mhm.
talk to me about the mindset stuff because
That's what you do,
that's my
right?
love, right?
That's well, and it is mine too, because even the physical stuff, I feel like really does come back to our thoughts. I mean, everything comes back to our thoughts, right? And even like diet change, like so many people when they want to know kind of what you asked, like what'd you do for diet? And I present it to them, it's really their mindset that's going to determine whether or
It's
not,
not enough. It's not relevant. Yeah.
yeah, and so teaching people how to make those diet changes without constantly living in deprivation is a huge thing. So I'm always bringing back even the physical stuff to the mindsets and the thoughts we have about it. But yeah, for me, it was a huge part of recognizing that there were the factual aspects of what was happening in my body. And then there was the narrative that I got to tell about it. And even for chronic pain, a lot of people think I'm just completely crazy that I could enjoy my life so much with chronic pain. But I'm like, that's not something I have control over, but I can decide the narrative that I have about that
Hmm.
and about
Hmm.
my life. And so it was so many layers. I had so much. So there was like all the surface stuff, like the pain, the limitations, all of that. But then once you go down that rabbit hole, right, I was like, oh, beliefs about myself and things I've carried around since childhood and limiting beliefs. It was just learning the power of my mind and that the fact that I can choose what I think about things. Mind blowing. Like nobody told me
So
that.
so let's explore some things because
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't really had this conversation with anybody truly deeply, right? So
Hmm.
there's a school of thought that says all physical pain comes from emotional pain.
Hmm.
Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay, so tell me what you think to be true.
So I think that it's just oversimplified. So I've seen both. So on the one hand, I mean, if I pinch myself, right, that hurt. That's not an emotional thing. That's just really purely physical sort of thing. But I have also seen, I did have some pain that was more of the chronic style of pain, right? So there's like chronic pain and there's acute pain. So
Hmm.
acute pain is like I broke a bone, right? And like that's going to have pain, and it's acute and it's based on a very specific thing. And so most of my pain has been acute pain. It's just been ongoing,
Hmm.
which is different from chronic pain, where chronic pain actually originates in the brain, not in the body. Now
Hmm.
it feels exactly the same. It's still just as real. It just originates in a different place. And so that kind of pain I have seen. So again, two aspects of it. One, that part of it is just the same like neural pathways, the same neural pathways where our brain learns this is what we think about ourselves or the world and it repeats that. Pain pathways can get strong too. So my body was in acute pain for such a long time that I have very, very strong pain pathways in my brain.
Hmm.
So if I experience even a little bit of acute pain, it makes all of those things fire, and I'll, experience some widespread pain. But then I also had stuff that I think was 100% emotion based, linked to things like shame, linked to things like trauma. And when I released those things, it moved. So I don't know. So I always I actually feel like there's kind of three different categories here of it, as opposed to just one umbrella thing that works for it across the board.
Okay. So I have many more questions, but how did you release the emotional aspect so that you're in pain, but you're up and around and things are better? Was that just the physical exercise, or was that the physical piece plus the emotional release?
I think it was both. And it's just been layers. Like I said, as I got stronger, I experienced less like physically, like I built muscle through just repetition and Pilates and things. I experienced less dislocations, less severe dislocations. So that was huge. Um, Going back and understanding, releasing the shame that like my condition was not my fault, cleared up some of the stuff.
Hmm.
Um, Retraining my brain to other pathways, like I'm having physical pain, I'm noticing a flare up, and being able to bring in things like gratitude and meditation so that it doesn't keep going, and retraining my brain to go to gratitude more than to pain was part of it. So I feel like, yeah, that's the thing. Like, I feel like for me, all of this work has been so multifaceted and multi-layered that like I never found like one school of thought that seemed to cover it all for me. I feel like I've
Hmm.
had to sort of pull from different ways of thinking and sort of applied all of them in different areas.
Okay. So now I want to talk about your coaching practice.
Yeah.
You coach people who have pain,
Yes.
and maybe you coach other people too, but
Yes.
how do you coach them? How do you help them cope with the pain, move away from the pain, deal with the emotional exacerbation of pain? Like, what is your process?
Yeah. So we start with really moving them into a place where they can accept what is, because so many people, they have a narrative that it shouldn't be this way,
Hmm.
right? Their
Hmm.
body should be different, and anytime they bring in that, they're in such a place of resistance that they can't move forward. So a huge part of it is initially just getting them to accept what is, and not like a it can't change, but instead of saying like it shouldn't be this way, it's like it is this way, and can we breathe into the fact that it is this way? And then, yeah, helping them choose a more helpful narrative. And a lot of it does have, distinguishing and helping them see that their circumstance or their pain, their physical pain, is not the same as emotional suffering. And I spend a lot of time distinguishing this for people, because I'm like, I can be in physical pain and not be suffering emotionally. And
Hmm.
that's why I let people know, like, there's an amount that we can do with diet change and things to help with the physical pain aspect. But most of what my coaching is helping them solve for that emotional suffering that comes afterwards.
Mhm.
And it's just all about like our narrative. So if I wake up and I'm in pain, like I'm not celebrating that. It's not like, yay, I love pain, but I believe that, right? I mean, that would be so weird. And that's what I tell my clients. They're like, I just want to be happy. I'm like, okay, but there are some things that to be happy about would actually be kind of weird. Like, we don't actually want to be happy about that. We just want to also be happy and to be able to let that be there, but then also be like, but I'm grateful for the tools that I have. I'm grateful for what I've learned. I'm grateful for who I've become. One of my favorite thoughts is who better than me? I'm like, I got a lot of practice at this, right? Like
Mhm.
I've been doing this for a decade. Like I know exactly how to show up. I know how to like work with my body. I know how to listen to my limits. I know how to process emotions that come up. And so at this point I can be in that physical pain state, but most of my emotions are gratitude and self appreciation, right? Or even just feeling capable or feeling confident in my ability to handle that. And so a lot of my work with people just involves really getting clear on what their narrative is now and kind of presenting a picture of where it could be and then systematically working through the limiting beliefs and helping them shift them bit by bit.
How do you find people's limiting beliefs? Like one of the things we do when I work with people is I ask them to journal in an online
Mm,
journal every single day. And that allows me to kind of pull out to find very quickly their limiting beliefs because they're writing their thoughts down.
mhm.
And again, they're thoughts. They're not necessarily facts. They're not
Right.
necessarily truths. They are thoughts from their perspectives. But
Yeah.
in those thoughts, I can easily identify and find limiting beliefs. How do you do it?
Yeah. It's actually very similar. When actually that was one of the things whenever I was looking at your stuff that I was like, that is so cool. I may have to talk to you about
Happy to
doing that.
talk.
It's so cool. But I do similar where I do have them do, mind dumps, journaling, thought downloads, whatever you want to call, so they can get clear on what their thinking is. And then yeah, it's similar where hearing them talk and sort of like asking those questions, because a lot of times what they give me are those surface thoughts, right? It's like, this is what I think about this, and I'll just ask those questions of like, okay, but why is that a problem for you? What are you making that mean about you? And it's those questions, and then we can both sort of feel energetically whenever we hit that like root chord. And then typically I'm just asking like, where else does this show up? And I think it's so fantastic for my clients who think that they have like 85 things, and then you realize typically there's just a couple of these really core beliefs. But it's similar, so I'm having them journal. I'm not typically looking at their journals, we're just talking through it, but it's very similar where a lot of it is me listening to them and being able to filter through and identify what that is.
So let me share with you something that happened to me maybe 4 weeks ago
Okay.
or so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly when this is going live, so it doesn't matter. But basically, I suddenly had an arm pain, a very severe arm pain,
Oh
and my
wow.
arm stopped moving. It stopped working. I couldn't lift it up. I couldn't wash my hair. I couldn't put a ponytail in my hair. I couldn't brush my teeth with my right
Girl.
arm. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't eat my dinner comfortably with my
Mm-hmm.
right arm. Like I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep on this side, not that side. I slept on a recliner for nights on end.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning it was just like pain, pain, fine, I can handle pain, no problem. But towards the end, I remember sleeping on the couch and my husband waking up one night looking for me. He found me on this couch and he came to check on me and he came to make sure I was okay and give me whatever I needed, a blanket, whatever. I couldn't move the blanket. Like it was that bad. And are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. And he went back to bed. And I remember like tears streaming down my face because I just felt like I'm in so much pain and it came out of nowhere. I didn't hurt myself. I didn't fall. I didn't hit myself. Nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
This pain came on from out of nowhere. But I remember like just literally, I'm like, wow, like talk about hitting rock bottom. And what's interesting is like right now we're in the middle of all this COVID business and people feel like their freedoms are denied. I'm like, wow, you know what? I have freedom. I have freedom of physical movement.
Yeah.
And when I can't move, now suddenly I really don't feel free.
Yeah.
And it's only one arm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and then we've
Um,
got yeah, and that yeah, and so many of my I remember that, having a day like that whenever the blanket moved and it was my ankles were cold and realizing I couldn't adjust the blanket and having one of those, like, that feeling of, like, helplessness,
yeah,
right?
total helplessness.
Yeah.
Just fixing the pillow a little bit. It wasn't going where I wanted it to go, right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I got better. How did I get better? My daughter happens to be in town,
Mhm.
living here during this time period, and she has very, very, very strong hands. And I just said, "Can one day, can you just give me a little massage?" And she found these massive knots in my body, on my back, my shoulders, my arms, like, and she just like kneaded them out. And the more she massaged my body, the more my arm was moving.
Mhm.
It was like she
Mhm.
cured me. It was unreal.
Mhm.
But there's a huge part of me that is very cognizant that there are moments of extreme stress that trigger strange physical reactions.
Yes.
In this particular case, like, I have 5 kids. One of my kids was really, really, really having a hard time being in the house during quarantine,
Mhm.
and he didn't respond well, you could say, to
Mhm.
being in the house. And things flared, like, they just blew up. They kind of exploded. Temporarily, but they exploded, but I'm pretty sure that was the trigger.
Yeah.
So, talk to me a little bit about that. Did I
Yeah.
make it up? Like, is that a truth? Could it be that we experience that degree of emotional debilitation as a result to pain?
Mm. Yeah. This is so fascinating, and I feel like this is actually a really fantastic example of the mind-body connection, right? Because so we've got layers, because if we have external stress, right? So there's what that's doing physiologically in the body and like the chemicals that are being released in your brain if we feel like we're in fight or flight, right? Like that's a huge part. That's going to affect us physically. But also too, if we're having those like tense stress things, right? Like we tend to not be relaxed. Like we physically respond to the emotion of stress by like our shoulders go up, right? And like we tend to like everything's tight, which leads to developing the knots, which leads to it pulling on the joints, which leads to things being out of alignment. And so that's like a whole thing where I'm like, okay, so then what do we blame that on? Is that physical? Is that emotional? Is that whatever? And I'm just like, we're complex beings with a complex emotional interchange. And yeah, so that's interesting because in that case, it's almost like the emotion was the trigger for how we were holding our body, which maybe led to it being pulled out.
Right.
And then once we're there and we're in physical pain, then we've got a whole second set of like emotional stuff based on what we think about the pain, how that feels physically, and then it kind of what that's going to trickle down and do within our body. Um, because I mean, they've proven scientifically that if we're in like a positive emotional state or a state of gratitude, it leads more to healing. And so many of my clients with chronic health issues, this was interesting because it sounds like you kind of do know the first trigger, and like so that combination of how those emotions created physical sensations in your body that went to that. And some of my clients, they don't know where it started, or there was probably stuff that they ignored for so long it's hard to identify it. But once it starts building and building and building and building, like imagine for you if that same pain was
Yeah.
still there in 6 years,
Yeah, it's hard to unravel, right? It's hard to
right?
undo it all. Yeah.
Yeah. But that sounds to me like that very fascinating interplay of how emotions, even though they originate with our thoughts, there are vibrations in our body that create physical sensations, which we then sometimes respond to with how we carry ourselves, which affects all the stuff. And yeah, so
Yes.
this has been a huge part of my business if because I mean I think you see a lot of female entrepreneurs and they get through on like stress and caffeine and hustle, right? So I have a lot of stuff about my condition that's genetic. Like I have some stuff that was more situational, like adrenal fatigue, but then certain things like predisposition to autoimmunity or my Ehlers-Danlos that's not going away anytime soon. As soon as my stress goes up, everything in my body goes haywire. So this like stress piece and its effect on the body, I don't know if there's I'm so hyper aware of it, and I don't think most people are. But like as soon as my pain goes up, and most women have this, there's like a spot in our, it's usually like left side, upper like shoulder blade area where we hurt and we get that big knot. And it's almost always related to stress. And like if you ask women across the board, it's almost that same spot. And that's my first tell that like my stress happened. I'll be going through and like I'll notice I like kind of do that motion. I'm like, ooh, that's my spot. And then I check in emotionally. I'm like, yep, stress is running a little high. And I have to stop and like work through that on a mental and emotional level. Because if I don't, yeah, everything else is going to
So
flare
let
up.
me ask you a question. And I think this is
Yeah.
a good place to kind of like wrap things up.
Cool.
For people who are listening who have
Hmm.
physical pain, let's
Hmm.
call it that knot, right?
Yeah.
Let's just call it that.
Hmm.
What do you recommend? What are the steps? What should they do for second and third to reverse the escalation of stress to the point of physical debilitation?
Hmm.
What is your recommendation?
Usually I tell people this and they don't want to hear it. But when people come to me and they say, I have a pain, usually the first thing I ask them is like, are you drinking enough water? And they roll their eyes, right? Like, blah, like really, like, no, tell me something I don't know, right? But I'm like, no, 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 because nothing in your body works well if you're not hydrated. And I'm always bringing back to people to, instead of trying to like step in with this big overarching thing and like fix a problem, I'm like, can we establish really good foundations that are going to be helpful no matter what? So I'm typically asking about hydration. If that's in place, the next two things I'm looking at are processed sugar. There's nothing else that I don't know of anything else that's more inflammatory in terms of what we put in our body. And typically also it's how we deal with stress instead of actually managing it on a mental and emotional level. So I'll ask people to take out processed sugar. And then I will usually direct them towards something like gratitude journaling. Because if we're talking like surface level, there's so much deeper work, but finding 3 things a day that they can be grateful for can start shifting that emotional space so we can go to some of the deeper stuff. But yeah, water, sugar, gratitude are some of my
Lori,
top 3 go-tos.
how do people find you?
Yeah, so probably connecting with me on Instagram is a great way over at Coach Lorrie Gray. If people happen to be chronically ill entrepreneurs, I also have some special stuff for them, or my website, lorriegray.com. Are
What do
really
you
great
have
ways.
special for them?
I just it's all new and up and coming, my friend. So depending on when this comes out and when I can work with my energy to make it happen. But I've had so many people want to know, how in the world are you running a successful coaching business? You know, that I'm in the process of scaling right now with the list of health things I have, because we only talked about a couple of them. My list is very, very long actually, and I have very limited energy. And so
You
I
look
have
fantastic.
Thank you. I also have days when I'm a total zombie whenever I'm out of energy, but I am working on getting some things together specifically for chronically ill entrepreneurs, probably some recorded content, probably some coaching programs just for them. But right now, there's just an Instagram page, The Ambitious Spoonie, but you can link to it from my Coach Lorrie Gray page. We're just starting to give people some little tips until I have something big for them, but I'm
So
excited
your
to share.
Instagram page, and by the way, it's Coach Lorrie Gray, Lorriegray.
Yes, lots of extra
Yes,
letters. Sorry about
lots
that,
of
guys.
lots of R's.
Lots of R's. I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, what was that about? She's like, it looked prettier when you wrote it that way. I'm like, fantastic. That'll work.
Lori, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah.
I found it personally very interesting because it seems to be relevant for me right now. So thank you so much. And please go find Lori. I think that her experience, her insights are very, very valuable. Go find Lori. Again, Coach Lorrie Gray on Instagram. Go find her.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. It was such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for hearing my story and talking. This was great.
Thank you. It was good to meet you in person.
Yes.